I feel like half the time we're already recording and it doesn't tell us. So, okay, there we go. Hello. Good to be back with the Meet the Mastermind series, where we bring the members of our Katalyst Consulting nonprofit mastermind community to the forefront and sort of pull the curtain back behind the work that we do over here and the amazing, really inspiring women that I get to work with almost on a daily basis. And so the purpose of this whole conversation or series of conversations is to learn a bit more about, each person on the other side of the conversation, what brought you into consulting, what your journey has looked like so far, the kinds of work that you're interested in doing, and just generally to help people see your brilliance and understand ways that the work that you do can support them and the organization. So this is now, I believe our fifth one. And they always just leave me so energized. I'm so excited to today get to talk with Candace Oglesby and just get to learn a little bit more about you. So did I say your last name right?
Yes, it's Oglesby.
Okay. I didn't check with you before we started. Normally I like to do a check. And it's also fun, because there's several of you that have been around for a very long time. And then some of you who are fairly recent to Katalyst. And so, like I said before with our last conversation with Dr. Asia Lyons, this is sort of my selfish way of getting to know you a bit better and to learn, I'm taking notes over here about ways that we can continue to support you out of these conversations. So happy to see you. This is our second time actually talking. So welcome to the conversation. I think the way that I'd love to get this one kicked off is to talk a bit about kind of what brought you to Katalyst, because I think, again, you were one of the ones that kind of found out about us, and I think it's really interesting to hear the story of what brought you to this particular community.
Yeah, no, thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me, Camilla. So I actually was introduced to Katalyst by a good sorority sister friend of mine, Najma, who is already a part of the group. And actually, I want to say we probably started our businesses around the same time, which was, for me, it's been about 3 years now since I started my consulting business. But I had actually gone through her coaching program and just talking about just the barriers and the limitations and the struggles and just kind of what this new life of being entrepreneur looked like. And so, we had done the initial coaching program, and I'm like, man, like I need more support. Like I'm realizing that entrepreneurship, and I think too, just being also a Black woman, I'm not meant to do this alone. I think that when we talk about the community, being in the collective, that, I really saw the need for doing this in community and allowing myself to be supported, but also being able to support others. And so she told me about Katalyst, and I was also preparing and planning a wedding, got married about 3 months ago.
And I didn't know that. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I was just like, my finances looking a little funny. And she was just like, no, I understand. And then like, fast forward, now that things have settled, I'm like, okay, now I can really give this the attention, but also the investment that is required. And so that's how I came about of being here. So
Najma has been such a supporter. She's with Chisholm Consulting Group. She runs coaching programs, as you mentioned, and has just been a supporter of ours really from day one. I consider her one of the OGs as well, and has really funneled a few people through the community. So I appreciate that. So I think, what I'd like to talk about next is you brought up community and doing this sort of thing within community. I think community is becoming a little bit cliche now. So as you think about your entrepreneurial journey, as you think about sort of where you were 3 years ago and where you are now that you're finding these spaces of community, what has that done for you? Again, thinking about the people who kind of listen to these things, people who are kind of considering and toying with the idea of consulting, not selling Katalyst in any kind of way, but like, what's the benefit, do you think, of finding in general community, and sort of what outside of Najma, sort of what were those steps that you took within you to determine that you were kind of ready for community?
Yeah, it sounds like there's like 3 or 4 different questions.
All right, there is.
Wrapped up in that, and I'll try to answer
interviewers. Let me boil it down to one. Okay, I'm gonna ask you one question because it was confusing. All right, so let's talk about community.
Yeah.
And where you were at the beginning of your journey and sort of where you are now, and why community is something that you felt you were ready for now, and what that's done for you. That is still like 3 questions.
It's okay. It's okay.
So let's see if we can tackle it.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. No, so that first question in terms of where I started, and kind of comparing that to where I am now, for sure. So just even I was sitting with like, what have I accomplished within the past 3 years of my business? And I realized that when I started my consulting business, it was more so me trying to expand out of direct clinical care. I was a therapist, had been a therapist for a while, but in the height of COVID, and just realized how burnt out I was becoming and providing direct clinical care. And so thinking like, okay, I have other skills, gifts, and talents. Why am I not leveraging this, right? Why am I just kind of pigeon holding myself to just being a psychotherapist and nothing else? And so I was like, you know what? I've been thinking about starting a consulting company. I'm just going to do it because nothing else is happening right now. I'm not going anywhere. This would be the perfect time to do that. And so as I started my consulting business, I had connected with a couple of continuing education companies to provide trainings for them on racial trauma and just really diverse topics that I think just the white dominant culture was not talking about, but needed to be talked about in the mental health space. And then that kind of snowballed into the first year where I was actually developing a niche. I was spending some time becoming a psychedelic assisted therapist. And because, right, the psychedelic space is what feels like is a smaller version of what's happening on a macro level within the mental health space, just really noticing the gaps around why am I the only therapist of color working on this psychedelic clinical trial? Why are there hardly any participants of color on these trials? And so I started to advocate for, making trials, making psychedelics more diverse, more equitable, more inclusive. And so from there, I had pharmaceutical companies asking, well, we're trying to start DEI boards. Can you be a part of that? Because we really need your voice. And so then that snowballed into other opportunities. And so even so much so, fast forwarding today, that I'm closing down my private practice come the first of the year so that I can really focus on macro level work in terms of how do we bring just accessibility, how do we bring access, how do we bring awareness to mental health and making it more diverse, equitable, and inclusive for everyone, so that everyone has access to cutting edge mental health treatment despite their background, their lived experience.
And so what got you interested in this space? Because I know because this is a space I'm not familiar with, so I'm going to just lead with my ignorance there. So what made you interested in and felt that this was sort of the next thing for you?
Yeah, so I had been working with a couple of coaches a while ago, probably 3 years ago when I was first starting my business. And it was always like, you need to find your niche. And so I was just sitting here waiting aimlessly, like, okay, I know I'm a trauma therapist, but I feel like everybody's a trauma therapist, right? Just really trying to figure things out. And it was a mentor who was not a mentor at the time, but became a mentor later, who said, I have this meeting coming up. Who might be interested in psychedelics? And I'm like, well, I've heard of this thing, but I come from the DARE generation. I don't touch drugs.
I was just talking about that the other day. That is so hilarious that you brought that up. Somebody's like, how come you never got like experiment? I was like, like I was raised on DARE. Like,
I was a DARE advocate, right? In elementary school, right? Like, we don't do those things.
No.
Having family members who had also succumbed to substance use addiction. And even my background, I started off as a practicing psychotherapist, but a lot of my work was in addictions. And so, I was like, I don't really know you and I don't really know this meeting, but I'm just going to come because, again, it's COVID. And maybe a part of me secretly just wanted to get out the house, right, and have something to do. But it literally ended up just upsiding my entire world, even just not from a professional standpoint, but even from a personal standpoint as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating how those seemingly random occurrences can kind of take us on a completely different
Yeah.
direction and trajectory. And I feel the passion and energy when you talked about it. You know, like you just kind of exude just this real interest and sort of excitement about supporting people, sort of using these methodologies, supporting not necessarily people even, but seeing how larger institutions
Mhm.
can understand a little bit more about this world and see how they can support their people. So, you know, we talked a little bit about before the camera, you know, went live, whatever, about what your real interests are sort of in this space that you're in right now. And so a question I like to ask people is like, what does an ideal client look like for you in this space? Again, as someone who can't put the two and two together of what maybe this might look like in a corporate setting or, you know, a setting within an organization. So share how you like to work with organizations in this capacity and what that could look like.
Yeah, so right now I really have a passion to really push psychedelic assisted therapy towards like HBCUs or even predominantly Black medical schools to have psychedelic clinical trials because I'm noticing that, you know, when we talk about prestigious universities like the Harvards and the John Hopkins, that yes, they have psychedelic research, but if you look at the leadership team, right? They're predominantly white folks. And even if you look at how the statistics when these clinical trials are being published, when you look at the participant data, it's still white dominant folks. And so, you know, my goal and what my desire is to work with either sponsors, pharmaceutical companies, or even HBCUs about how do we really get ahead of this to offer this to our people so that our people have access to these medicines. And so it's not just right from how do we get more participants as far as recruitment, while also leveraging how do we increase representation from a therapist standpoint, but how do we train these therapists to offer this type of modality from an anti-oppressive lens? So there are protocols, there are training manuals, but again, they're from the lens of the white dominant folk, right? Where it doesn't take into consideration the cultural factors that we need to consider. That yes, it's one thing to invite people, Black and brown, queer, transgender, to the table, but there has to be policies and procedures to be able to sustain these folks when we invite them to the table. So if we're not giving them cups and knives and plates to use, then what's the purpose of even having, you know, these folks at the table? So it's one thing to invite, but it's another to also be able to sustain. But we need to be able to interweave DEI concepts into every being, right, of the process from start to finish, starting from leadership all the way down to participant.
And so if someone were to hire Candace Oglesby to help them do this work, are you consulting with them on the processes and like who needs to be at the table and consider this? Are you creating sort of the research models? Like what is your
Yeah.
expertise?
So my experience, and you know, this is just crazy, but you know, even within the past 3 years, I've had an opportunity to be a research therapist. So right now I'm working with a principal investigator, and we're working on a study right now about how we can support BIPOC therapists with breaking through the barriers to be able to be psychedelic assisted therapists. I'm working with pharmaceutical companies, how to be more culturally inclusive, even from content creation all the way down to protocol writing, to manual writing, training therapists, really supporting the participants from a culturally inclusive lens. So I'm really helping throughout all of the processes. I found that my skills and my talents are being able to leverage even in places that I didn't think that I could. But I do have a minor in undergrad in gender and diversity studies. So I have been able to leverage those skills, but also really be in a position to learn also skills as I am what I would say almost perfecting my craft in those ways. So not just a therapist holding space, but also helping behind the scenes with protocol development, content creation, participant recruitment, even helping leaders to explore their own biases, and researchers around their own biases and how that even shows up in the statistical data as well. So
Fascinating. Some like topic that just completely opened my mind to. Like y'all are so smart. Like I say it all the time. Y'all are so smart. And I think anybody that is coming across these things needs to figure out how to how to gobble up all the talent that is here. I mean, it's just it's
Yeah.
incredible. So let's talk a little bit about your consulting journey. So what's it been like for you last 3 years? Tell me about the highs and the lows.
Oh
If
man.
someone were interested
Yeah.
in someone wants to make the transition, what are things to consider? Once again, I've asked you probably 4 questions in one.
It's okay.
So
It's
let's start
okay.
with I'm gonna work on my interview skills, but let's start
Yeah.
with what have been some of the highs and lows for you as part of the last 3 years of your journey?
Yeah. I will say I think the first year was just pure excitement. It's like I'm doing this. I still have my private practice, really wasn't concerned about how much money. I was just glad that my business had made some money. It's like, okay, so maybe there's a need, right? That was the first year. Then the second year, my consulting company actually went to 6 figures. It went from 5 figures to 6 figures within a year. And so I was like, man, I was like, okay, there's really a need out here,
And
right?
was that with individual clients? Was that working with larger
Yeah, so it
contracts?
was a mixture of both. It was taking
Mm-hmm.
on individuals, it was taking on businesses, organizations, but a lot of the revenue, of course, came from the work that I was doing with organizations and
Okay.
businesses.
Okay.
And just super busy. Even so much to the point at that time, my fiance was like, don't take on nothing else. You got a lot going on personally, but also professionally. And I think also the second year was also, it was kind of like my wow year where it was like, I was proving to myself, like, man, like I am really more than just a psychotherapist. Like, I feel like once you get this license, right, which I thought was the epitome of I'm just going to ride the wave for the rest of my life in private practice, meeting with clients one-on-one, and this is the goal, right? To get to the license, get to private practice and be done, and to be introduced to what felt like was a whole nother world within the second year. Really just, it made me so appreciative of just the journey, the process. And I just had a lot of gratitude for my courage to be able to step out there, do things outside of the box, be challenged, but also allow myself to be invited into spaces that I didn't even think were possible.
Mm.
And had an opportunity to travel internationally, right? I wasn't traveling as a therapist prior to being a consultant. So just really humbled and grateful for the opportunities that existed in the second year. So here I am in the third year, and stuff has gotten really real as an entrepreneur. Because part of what has been a large part of my identity, I am stepping away from, coming from the end, the end of this year. And my income that was associated with being a psychotherapist is shifted significantly in a decrease, I would say, kind of way.
But is that because your energy is focused on something else, or is
Yeah,
that
for
yeah?
sure.
Okay.
My
Okay.
energy is now solely focused on my own business.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like I am really feeling the impact of what it means to be an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where it's like I don't have consistent income necessarily coming from over here, right? Where I know that I have my 20, 30 clients I'm going to be meeting with, right? A
Mm-hmm.
week. In addition to I have my consulting company. So now it's just really solely focusing on the business of my brand.
Mm-hmm.
Really kind of feeling like, man, this is really what entrepreneurship is, the grind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I feel like the third year has also taught me, but also it's teaching me to be patient
Mm.
as well, because things have not been coming as quick. I think as I maybe expected it to, based on how the second year was. But I had, again, a lot of income coming in from different ways that wasn't necessarily attached to my consulting business. But now that I'm solely focusing on my consulting business, things take time,
They take time. They take time, and I'd also say that it sounds about right, right? Like you did the stuff you did in the beginning, like you're learning from, figuring out what felt right or not, pivoting the way you need to pivot. And I think this is just going to be a new rebirth, really, because I think that probably year one, you probably felt was an exciting rebirthing of some sort, where you were trying to figure out the one-on-one client situation. And now there's another opportunity for rebirth. And it doesn't, this is what I always say, like, nothing has to be forever, right? Like, you can say, I'm gonna go hard for a year, right? And see what this feels like, see what it looks like, see what some of the return is, see what some of the relationships are like that I'm able to build. What is the momentum feeling like at the end of the year? And then reevaluate potentially, right? Like, so I think, not sure if you're in this space, but like when you can kind of put things into that perspective, it feels less daunting and less overwhelming. I'm in a similar space right now of sort of reevaluating some things regarding the different like offerings or whatever that I kind of fell into as well. And what are the things that are bringing me joy? What are the things that are taking up and eating up time? So you're right. It's all part of the grind. It really is all part of the grind. And I think the key is consistency for a while, right? Like a few years, and see what it feels like, and then see what you need to be doing after those few years, So I applaud you for the 3 years of hustle that you put into it, for really making the hard decision of what no longer felt good for you and leaning into this new space. So, I just hope that, again, anyone that's out there that is listening and feels like this is a service or this is something that, excuse me, their organization or company needs or their people need, sort of in the health space, I hope they consider you, and I hope they look at your extensive background, visit your LinkedIn page, and just check out all the great things that you have going on. So what's the best way for people to reach you if they are interested?
Yeah, so I have my website. It's www.journeywithcandace.com, but it's not spelled your typical journey. It's spelled JURNEE. And anything that I have to offer is on that website. Services, even about me. I have podcast interviews, media. So anything my consulting business offers, what I've been a part of, is on that website.
Great. Very good. Okay. Exciting stuff. It was great to get to know you a little bit more. Is there anything I didn't ask that you want to share, or anything that you might think might be valuable to others who are kind of in this consulting mindset and wanting to make the transition? And we can end it on that note.
Yeah, I just want to say, and I've just been kind of, leaning on this is, bet on yourself. I think for a lot of us, I think there's false security around, working for folks, especially when we're sitting on gifts, ideas, talents, and it's even if you decide to do your own thing part-time starting off, I just encourage folks to take a gamble on themselves. We're taking gambles on other people's missions and other people's corporations and organizations. And so we're just as worthy. And so, just take that bet on yourself. Yeah.
Right. It does something for you internally once you say, I'm going to try something, and then give it a go. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
There's some sort of, I don't know, there's some sort of growth that kind of happens, and something that unlocks internally kind of once you, if you want that, once you actually do it. Yeah. So, okay. Well, thank you for this time. I'm happy. I'll be sharing this around on LinkedIn. Thank you, Kiara, from our community, for joining. And we'll look forward to another one of these, hopefully in a few weeks, with another mastermind member. So thank you for being part of the community. I think the beauty is in all of the spirits and all the energy and all the people and the smarts, like the really smart, brilliant people who are part of this community. So I do hope that you found some folks there that you can connect with, and just thank you for everything that you bring to our space.
Yeah, thank you.
So, thank you. Okay. Thank you very much, Candace.